Every single company, whether it's a tiny startup just getting off the ground or a massive global corporation, they all face the same basic problem. How in the world do you make smart choices when everything is constantly changing? How do you know where to put your money, your time, your bets for the future? Well, let's break down how the best in the business actually figure that out. Seriously, just imagine this for a minute. You're the boss. You've got a portfolio of 100 different products, and they're all screaming for your attention and your budget. Some of them are your old, reliable classics. Some are shiny new things that are super exciting. And let's be honest, some are just kind of there. How do you possibly choose where to put your resources? It seems completely overwhelming, but believe it or not, there are some really powerful frameworks designed for this exact problem. Okay, so before you can make a single move, you absolutely have to understand the world you're playing in. It's kind of like a pilot doing a full weather check before even thinking about taking off. You've got to analyze the market to get the lay of the land. Look, market analysis isn't some kind of dark art. It really just starts with asking some very direct, very basic questions. As research from Harvard Business School points out, managers need to know the simple stuff. Just how big is the playground we're in? Is that playground getting bigger or is it shrinking? And who else is in there playing with us? And how much of the sandbox do they control? Answering these questions builds the entire foundation for every decision that comes next. And a really big piece of that puzzle is something called the product lifecycle. I mean, think about it. The strategy you'd use for a brand new smartphone that's in an explosive growth phase is going to be wildly different from the strategy for, say, a landline phone, which is, pretty clearly in decline. Just knowing where your product sits on this curve tells you so much about its future potential and what kind of help it's going to need from you. All right, so you've got a handle on your market size and where your product is in its life cycle. The very next step is to realize that your market isn't just one giant, uniform blob of customers. No way. It's more like a pie made up of a bunch of different slices. And the real art is figuring out how to slice it up. And that brings us to this key idea, market segmentation. You can think of it as the Goldilocks solution for marketing, right? You can't treat every single customer exactly the same. That's way too broad. But you also can't create a custom-tailored plan for every individual person on the planet. That's just impossible. Segmentation helps you find that just right spot in the middle by putting similar customers into groups. So why even bother doing this? Well, because it's incredibly smart and efficient. Segmenting your market helps you zero in on your strengths, put your limited resources where they'll have the biggest bang for the buck, and it makes it crystal clear what you're actually trying to accomplish. It's all about being targeted and strategic, instead of just being loud. So how do you actually do it? Well, there are a ton of ways to slice that pie. You can group people by where they live, that's geographically. You can group them by things like age or income, demographics. You could even group them by how much of your product they use, your heavy users versus your light users. And you can get even fancier and look at their lifestyles or personalities, which we call psychographics. Each method gives you a totally different but super valuable way of looking at your customers. So once you've done your homework, you've analyzed the market, you've segmented your customers, you can finally turn all that knowledge into real action. This is where you start managing your products not just as separate items, but as a whole interconnected portfolio, kind of like how an investor manages their stocks. And the core idea behind all of this portfolio planning is actually beautifully simple. You can evaluate any product, any business unit on just two dimensions. That's it. First, how attractive is the market it's in? And second, how strong are we inside that market? Those two questions are the key to everything. And this two-dimensional way of thinking led to one of the most famous strategic tools ever created. It was developed by the Boston Consulting Group, or BCG, and it's called the Growth Share Matrix. You can basically think of it as a strategic map for your entire business. The two axes of this map, well, they boil down to those two big ideas we just talked about. The vertical axis is all about industry attractiveness. How great is the playground? And the horizontal axis is all about your business strength, or how well you're actually playing the game. So how do we measure this stuff? Well, for industry attractiveness, the matrix uses something called market growth rate. It's pretty straightforward. A market that's growing at 20% a year is a way more attractive playground than one that's shrinking. That becomes our vertical axis. And for business strength, the matrix uses something really clever, relative market share. Now listen, this isn't just your market share. It's your share divided by the share of your single biggest rival. So if you're the leader, your number is bigger than 1. If you're a follower, it's less than 1. It's a brilliant way to capture your real competitive muscle. Now here's where the magic happens. When you take all your different products and plot them on this grid, with growth on one axis and relative share on the other, they naturally fall into one of 4 boxes. And each box tells you something incredibly important about that product's role and the strategy it needs. Up in the top left corner, you've got your stars. These are your champions, products in fast-growing markets where you are the leader. They have absolutely massive potential, but man, are they cash hungry. They need constant investment to keep growing and fight off the competition. These are, without a doubt, the future of your company. Then, in the bottom left, you'll find the cash cows. These are your established, reliable leaders in mature, slow-growth markets. They don't need huge investments anymore, but because they're the dominant player, they just churn out cash, day in and day out. They are the financial engines that power everything else. Over in the top right, we have the question marks, and that's exactly what they are, total wildcards. They exist in these exciting, high-growth markets, but you've got a weak position. This creates a huge dilemma. Do you pour a ton of money into them to try and turn them into a star, or do you just cut your losses and get out? It's a really high-stakes gamble. And finally, down in the bottom right, we have the dogs. These are products with a weak position in a low-growth market. Now, they don't always lose money. A lot of them just break even. But they just sit there, tying up money and management attention that could and probably should be used for something much more promising. And let me be clear, this is not just some neat theoretical exercise. When you plot a real company's portfolio on this chart, it looks something like this. A whole galaxy of circles, where the size of each circle represents its sales. This one simple image can give a CEO a powerful, at-a-glance snapshot of their entire corporate universe. But hey, a map is pretty useless if you just stare at it, right? You have to use it to navigate. So the final and most important step is to use this map to actively manage your portfolio, to move resources around to build a much stronger future. This slide shows the perfect flow of resources. The whole strategy is to take that excess cash being churned out by your reliable cash cows and you reinvest it. You pump that cash into your most promising question marks. The goal? To give them enough fuel to grow their market share and hopefully become stars. Then, down the line, as the markets for those stars start to mature, they themselves become the next generation of cash cows. And the whole beautiful cycle starts all over again. So when you boil it all down, it gives you 4 very clear missions. For your stars, you build. For your cash cows, you harvest. For your question marks, you have to make that tough call, build or get out. And for your dogs, you harvest what you can or you divest. The matrix doesn't give you the answer, but it makes your choices crystal clear. This whole framework gives us a powerful new way to see the business world all around us. So the next time you see one of your favorite brands launch a new product or maybe get rid of an old one, think about this matrix. Ask yourself, are they feeding a star? Are they milking a cow? Are they placing a big bet on a question mark? Or are they finally getting rid of a dog? Once you start to see the world this way, you can't unsee it.